Okay, so let's talk about now. We've talked about the positives that you got from AA. Let's start talking about some of the negatives as you look back on it, because whatever they were, you hung in it for a long time. So were you realizing these things as negative at the time, but just kind of putting them to the side?
Yeah, that's the thing about brainwashing, though. So if I look at those first, almost it took the first 3 years. So it was really good for the first 7 months, and then something started to shift where they started to pressure me that you have to do the first part of the first step into powerlessness. And I said, I can't, I quit on my own. So I did not have that kind of problem with the substance alcohol like some of you guys do. I stopped on my own. And then I moved forward. And so then it just felt like people were like trying to like it almost felt like they were trying to like screw my brain. And I really started to feel like I was going crazy. And I started to try to do more service. So I brought meetings into prison. And that started to, after a while, feel really fucked up. I was 20 and I was going into the men's prison on Oahu, like on a weekly basis with this group of Hawaiians, AA members. There was just something wrong with the picture. And I was 13-stepped when I was about a year sober by two middle-aged men that I lived in a house with my sister and I was really almost suicidal at that point. And the AA community, there were like half of it where these young people were like, it's sort of your fault, it's your fault basically. But there was another group that were not. They were very supportive. They're about 20 years older. She became my AA sponsor, and they were very angry about it, and they supported me. So I did not feel like I had a good family back home in New York. I didn't feel like I had this, and I didn't. I mean, I was, in the middle of the Pacific, first of all. I'm out in those islands, and I didn't have family. So I felt like they really took me in, and I had this community, right? But I did feel through the period up till I had like 3 years, and I was 21 years old, that I was getting worse and worse and worse. But the thing is, Jim, I didn't know to leave. Like, I didn't think to leave. I didn't say, this is a really fucked up group of people, and I should not ever come here again. Like, that never even dawned on me. Mm-hmm. And I wondered after I left, when I was, searching and doing my own radio show, what is it about AA that's similar to Scientology, say, when I'm watching the Leah Remini show, that I stayed. And I started to look at some of the language that's used in AA, it's we, it's, us. Oh, I don't matter. Me, that's bad. Like, you can't talk about the I and me. It's like the group is more important than the individual is a tradition in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's really pushed. And I was brainwashed. That's what I'm going to say. I was brainwashed.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned 13th Step, and we know that's the name of the documentary, but let's just make sure we define that term. So what does it mean to be 13th stepped?
So to be 13th step, you are taken advantage by an older member, and you are a younger member, probably a lot newer, for sex. And sometimes it's sex and money.
It's not necessarily your sponsor.
No. Well, I've heard people be 13 stepped by a sponsor.
Okay.
But usually you don't have a same-sex sponsor. If you're heterosexual, if you're gay, a lot of them do, but that's problematic.
And some of the meetings are co-ed and some are not, correct?
Right. So as the years have gone on and things were predatory, the women were like, okay, we're going to have a women's meeting. And then actually men, they're more popular in, say, big cities, started to have a stag meeting because the guys who were like, got their shit together and were married, they were tired actually of crazy women. Like if a guy like you was, they were like.
So as we sit here today, what percentage of meetings are co-ed versus same-sex?
I would say they're still more co-ed. I don't know the number, but I guess like maybe 80% is still co-ed. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's defined as an older male being a predator on younger. And how do we define the difference between being a predator versus simply asking somebody out on a date?
So there's a big difference. And there are women who are sexual predators. There's 13-steppers also in Alcoholics Anonymous. They would be called like a cougar woman. So she would be my age, or like 40 to 60, and a really cute, like 25-year-old guy comes in. And I heard, men have told me those stories, as well as my situation would be two middle-aged men, one being 35, the other being 45, wanting to sleep with me and my sister. And we were 19 and 21. And I had almost a year, and she had 6 months. So these guys had,
Your sister was in AA with you.
Yeah, she came after me. I sort of.
You brought her into it.
Yeah, she definitely had.
Did she have a problem?
She definitely had a problem. Probably her beer drinking, her alcohol drinking had gotten worse than mine. So I was trying to help her, and she joined, and she was in for years.
So again, to the predatory nature, in what way are they exploiting you?
Many times, so not my situation, but say a young woman that I met on my way out. So she's got like 3 months, and a guy has 9 years. She's 21, he's 28. He keeps asking, does she want to ride? No thanks, no thanks, no thanks. Okay, fine. Gets a ride because she has a DUI. She can't drive. Drives to her apartment. Can I come up? Well, she doesn't, trust me, she doesn't know how to say no yet. Okay, she's 21 and she's like 90 days sober. All right, you can come up. They come up, they have sex. He never leaves. She's working full time. He has no job.
Hmm.
Right? And she can't get him out.
So is it kind of defined as A, they're kind of there for the purpose of hooking up with women, right? Is that what these predators do? They're going in for that purpose.
Well, there's three kinds.
Yeah.
So there's ones that actually, rapists that actually know that AA is one of the better places to pick women up. So you have a real rapist going there. You have AA men and some AA women who know this game, and so your guys are older and the women are younger, or they could be kind of similar age, but they're always newcomers. They have less time. And so they think that you're interested in me because you want to, like, let's go read the big book together. And, actually the people who are really predatory use the language of talking about the program as the connection. Tell me about your trauma, and then the person starts talking about whatever happened to them, and they become really vulnerable. And
by the way, tell me about your trauma, but that's not in the steps, is it? Identifying?
No, none of that is. And nobody uses this word. This is like a new buzzword, right? Trauma is like nobody. And in Alcoholics Anonymous back in the day, in the 70s and 80s, when I was really into it, it was even looked down to see a therapist, like, although people started to go see therapists.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of one of my big knocks on it, is that from what research we've done so far, the big things that you need to do is probably some form of medication and some one-on-one individual counseling, probably about childhood traumas.
And that's a good point, because when I would get to, as I was staying sober, there were things that would come up to deal with my own childhood trauma, which was sexual abuse. I had an assault when I was turning 16. The summer I was 15, sorry, and then, and I had never addressed that. So obviously, here you are, you're not drinking, you're not doing anything, so you're really kind of waking up, and you're going, realizing I had some issues with my relationships with men, and then I would talk to my sponsor, and like none of them knew what to say to me, or even to talk about my childhood sexual abuse, and so I began to feel even weirder, and then what would I do with that? And so at some point,
nobody's advising you to go see a psychologist about it.
No.
And work through that trauma.
Not until the 80s, like the later 80s. And by then I had 10 years sober.
So this show is about what's going on today. So tell me, I'm sure you're not really going to AA anymore.
No,
right?
I left 8 years ago.
But what's your understanding today as far as if somebody mentions in the roundtable discussion that I was abused as a child, is someone in the meeting going to say, wow, you really need to go see a psychologist about that? And you also may need some medication for your depression?
Certainly in the sane meetings, that there are sane meetings. Like the last meeting that I went to was a women's meeting, maybe 40 women. A lot of us had over 20 years of sobriety. Somebody would probably, even in their share, say, I went to therapy finally. Anyone who's depressed, people would share and say, I had to, actually, as I was leaving, there were a lot of women that were starting to begin to take medication who were depressed clinically after being sober like 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
So you could be also in a meeting where, I don't know, now with all the talk about mental health, there might be less and less of that. But 7 years ago, there's a famous group, the Pacific Group, where, one guy there was telling people for years to never take their medication, that they weren't sober. And then I heard, there were many people that committed suicide. And then as I was leaving, somebody came into our group and they were like, oh, so-and-so said you can now take your medication. I was like, after 30 years, like, who are you to say whether somebody, should or not take an antidepressant or an anxiety medication, or go do ayahuasca if that works?
Or naltrexone.
Right. Okay. So yeah, that naltrexone. So that's the part that I really began to see as really sad as I was leaving, is that there were a couple of women who would come and they just wouldn't stay sober, and they'd have to raise their hand. They were ashamed, and this group didn't shame them, but I didn't even know about naltrexone. I didn't know about smart recovery or harm reduction or moderation management.
When did you first learn about naltrexone?
I think I was gone, maybe when I was blogging on the Orange Papers or on a blog.
So how many years ago?
Sorry, 2010.
Yeah.
2010.
Not that you would have taken it, but
No, I didn't need to take it.
right. But
I
here's
didn't need it.
someone who is living and breathing, addictions, and you don't even know about
Yeah,
this drug.
you
Yeah,
don't even
it's
know.
like, well, I'm embarrassed to say, not that I would have needed it, but I hadn't known of it until this show. So it's just incredible to me, and I've been trying to figure out why is it that people don't know more about it. Yeah, we know that AA isn't necessarily a big supporter of it,
Right, right.
but how come I see Ray Liotta doing Chantix commercials all over
Right,
Fox
right.
and other cable channels
Yeah.
for smoking, but nobody's doing it for naltrexone?
It would be nice if somebody would. I mean,
But it's got to be, it's the drug company that's got to pay for it. Why isn't it?
would be
Who's
nice
this
if they
drug company
would.
and why aren't they paying for it?
Well, I looked it up when I heard, that it's been around for, actually, the FDA approved it here since '94, right? So that's a long time. It's 24 years. But Claudia Christian, who made her film One Little Pill, and she used it, she's, a famous actress, that it's because they've made it cheap, so nobody's really making money. So it's not an expensive drug, but that really still doesn't answer it. I think that because our culture in Hollywood, Hollywood is so embedded with AA and it. And there's such these great supporters of it. You see a show like Mom, that's almost like a commercial for Alcoholics Anonymous. Have you ever seen that show?
No.
But I'm with you. Like if I could afford a billboard, and put one up and say naltrexone, and we could do an ad that some lovely person could say, hey, but see, they used Ray Liotta. They used a famous person
Yeah.
that could attach and say, oh, that sounds great. I agree with you. I think it's a shame. My father died behind this stuff, and it was really sad that I knew nothing about it, and I pushed AA on him.
My friend has been in and out of AA for 15 years. Finally got on naltrexone, and he credits that for having him stop.
Wow.
Yeah.
With heroin. This is the heroin.
No, that was
someone else.
another friend, alcohol.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's great. But
I
there's
know,
10 years
15
wasted.
Yes, right.
A lot of AA meetings down
Yeah.
the tubes.
I know.
So, okay, well, you called it a cult, or you compared it to Scientology. So make your best case that AA is a cult.
So we call it a quasi-cult, a baby cult. It's our joke amongst us who've left. But the reason that I see it as a cult is that you are told that if you ever leave, you will die or drink, go insane, or go to prison.
I do remember that,
Right?
by the way, from my, I told you before we started, a DUI about 15 years ago,
Yeah.
and court ordered, and we're going to talk about court ordered,
Mhm.
to go to 6 AAs. I managed to, I think, go to 3 or 4 and somehow figure out a way to get signed in on
Right.
the other 2. So I made
Right.
it through 3 or 4 of them. But that's something that sticks with me, you saying that. I remember them saying that, basically, you walk out that door and you will die.
Yes.
That's kind of a mantra, right?
That's right. And also, only we can help you. Oh, really? So even in their book, and really in the whole ideology and the culture of Alcoholics Anonymous, is that it's one alcoholic to another. That we're different. We're somehow different than a brother or your parent or your wife or your spouse. To say, John, come on, you're like, let's do something here. That only we can help you, that's a sign of a cult. No, you're not. You're not. And the other one is that you'll...
Now, I didn't know that was one of their mantras. So tell me, in what way is it conveyed that only we can help you? Who's saying that? The moderator at the meeting?
No, it's in their literature in the way of it's if you were to study it, which I studied the big book. I went to big book studies and 12 and 12 studies and have it all highlighted in yellow. And, it just says that we can understand where no one else can. Well, yeah, maybe. But the fact that when people, say when family members go to when they go to Betty Ford, or when they go to a big treatment center that's very well respected, they're going to look at the family and go I'm sober 10 years. They have this arrogance that because they have time, that they are better than you even, or that they know more. We all had it. I had it. We joke about
By the way, that superiority, I believe, sits also in born-again Christians. I don't know if you have much experience with born-again Christians.
just a little bit, yeah.
But that is cultish as far as the same type of effect that it has on people. And they take on an air of superiority because they have found the light. They are chosen. Yeah. They've given their life over to God, and you haven't. And you're going to a bad place, and I'm going to a good place.
and the we and the us. So at every meeting, except the agnostics meeting, I found that out listening to one of your shows, they read a chapter 5, which is a page, 2 pages and a half, and the 12 traditions and the preamble. And in it, in chapter 5, it says, you were naturally born this way. You are naturally incapable of, able to be honest with yourself. You are like a man you have broken legs. You will never grow new ones.
Like the original sin concept in Christianity.
Right. But there is only one, and that power is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at, it's very doom and gloom and says some really abusive things about you, like a person when you walk in there, that when I finally left and I was criticizing it on my show, I was like, oh my God, they just said you're naturally and constitutionally incapable of being honest with yourself. What the fuck does that mean? And how did you even know that, Bill Wilson? He wrote it, there were only 100 people, and this is the whole thing about them vetting it and, researching it when he wrote the book, and he said all this stuff. It was from 1935 when they say it got created, the two guys meet. 39, it gets published. So really, 100 people is a study? Or you know so much that then you're going to say this to 800,000 people in the United States? And you know what? The truth is that people are leaving in droves. So if New York knows, Narcotics Anonymous headquarters knows that they cannot retain their old timers. Why? Because you grow out of it. You don't want to sit there and listen to this stuff anymore.